Well, good afternoon, folks, and welcome back. Cumberland Outdoorsman out here at my shooting range with another one of my 22 rimfire series videos. Today I'm just plinking away with this newly acquired Remington Nylon 66, and I got this one at a pretty good deal, so I just couldn't quite resist picking it up. Well, the reason I brought these two nylons out here was to show you that there is a slight difference in the coloration, and I don't know if the camera is going to pick it up or not, but I'm going to lay these side by side and show you what I'm talking about. Okay, this one here is the one that I recently picked up, and it's definitely in Mohawk brown, and I think this one here is too. But if you look at them closely, you can see this one here has more of a reddish brown coloration, and this one here has kind of a grayish brown. I don't think it's the Seneca green because there is no green coloration at all. I'm not sure if the camera is picking that up or not, but you can see there is a difference between the two browns here, and I think it's just a variation of the nylon that they happen to use at the time. This one here is a 1962 and this one is a 1966. Neither one of these rifles have a serial number, and I don't believe that this is in Seneca green, but you know, I don't know all that much about them. I just wanted to show you all to see what you thought, and maybe you can leave your comments below. Once again, just showing you the difference. You see how that has more of a grayish look to it? I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. But Seneca green nylon 66s are rare enough, so I highly doubt that that's what this is. But speaking of rare nylon 66s, I have one here that's extremely rare. This one here belongs to a friend of a friend, and they asked me to clean it up and pretty much restore it. And he didn't even know what he had here. As you can see, it's got quite a bit of rust here on the receiver cover, and there's some rust on the barrel. But I got to looking at this gun, and it's definitely Mohawk brown. But when I looked at the barrel, I saw the marking there right below where it says Remington. It says 22 short. And I got to doing a little bit of research on this, and this turns out to be a 22 short gallery special, which is, from my understanding, ultra rare and worth quite a bit of money if it were in good shooting condition. If you look here at this nylon 66, for example, it says 22 long rifle only. Okay, and this one here, once again, 22 short. And I tried chambering a long rifle round into this gun, and it would not accept it, but it will chamber 22 short. So I'm going to be taking this gun completely apart, trying to get all the rust off of it, and I'll go completely through everything here. There's quite a bit of damage done to the gun over the years. I don't know how people let anything like this get so rusty and in bad shape, but it happens. I see it all the time. So follow along with me, and let's see if we can get this little gallery special shooting once again. Well, friends, here we are in my den with this nylon 66 we're going to be working on. And hopefully I got some good lighting here directly above me so that you can follow along with what I'm getting ready to do. But before I take this gun apart and show you how to do it, let me just say that I removed this receiver here, and got most of the really bad rust off of it. I took it to work with me and I soaked it in some penetrating oil and went over it with a real copper penny, not one of the newer ones. You want a pure copper penny, and lifted all the rust off of it. It's still got some speckling here, as you can see, but it's not too bad. You know, you can't feel it when you run your hand over it, so it turned out fairly decent. And the owner is just going to take it out and shoot it anyway, so he's not too worried about the collector value as far as I can understand, even though if it were my gun, I would take everything down to the metal and send all the metal parts off to be hot blued in a hot bluing tank. I've got the original barrel still here. This is the 22 short gallery special barrel, and I went ahead and installed a 22 long rifle chambered barrel on the gun because that's what the owner wants to do. He wants to be able to take it out and shoot long rifle cartridges through it. But now this barrel here is pretty much ruined unless you were to reline the barrel, and I did that in another video on another gun that I own. But here on the end of the barrel itself, there's a bulge, and when you look through the bore, you can see a black ring inside the bore. What happened is there was something obstructing the barrel here on the end, and somebody fired a round through there, and the pressure caused the barrel to bulge out. And sadly, I see that on a lot of older 22s because people either shot a squib load through it and the bullet got lodged inside the barrel, and unknowingly they chambered another round and fired it, and that obstruction causes the bulge in the barrel. You know, sometimes it'll blow it right on out without bulging it, but in many cases, you know, if it's a bad obstruction, it will bulge out a 22 long rifle barrel. But anyway, I'm going to hold on to this original part and give it back to the owner because, you know, they may want to restore the gun one day to its original condition for collector value. Also, the stirrup that holds the barrel in was broken, as you can see. And the receiver cover screws or bolts were missing. There were none. And on the other side of the receiver, you have these little threaded discs that are pressed into the receiver. This one here was missing. I don't know how that came out. I've never seen one with those parts missing because they're pressed in at the factory, you know, so they're meant to stay in place. I don't know how that came out of there. But anyway, I fashioned another one out of a threaded nut and re-blued it so that the receiver cover will be held on firmly, you know, the way it's supposed to be. I got another barrel, as I said, a 22 long rifle barrel, and the gun's working flawlessly. I took it apart, cleaned it, and I'm going to go ahead and take it back apart because I want to work on the stock. The stock is kind of scratched up there. I'm going to go over it with some real fine wet or dry paper, sandpaper. There you can see all the scuff marks. And then I'm going to polish it out with a polishing wheel to try to at least bring back some of the luster in this old nylon stock. So I'll be taking this back apart, going over the stock, and then reassembling the gun, and then we'll take it out and test fire it. So I'm going to show you step by step how to take this little rifle apart in case you own one and you want to disassemble it, clean everything out, you know, just spotless clean it, and put it back together the way it's supposed to go back together like it was from the factory. So follow along with me. Let's go ahead and pan down here, and I'll show you how to do this. I showed you how to disassemble other rifles such as the Marlin Model 60 and of course the Remington 581 and the Marlin 39A and other models. But now the Nylon 66 can be somewhat of a, what I would term, a ball bearing mousetrap. There's a lot of springs and little pins and stuff that's in here that most people don't know how to put these back together once they get them apart. But I'm going to show you how. First of all, let's make sure the gun is not loaded. Okay, it's empty. And we'll go ahead and remove the magazine tube here. Just for now, we'll be putting it back in later. And the first thing to do is take the charging handle off. Some of these will come off fairly easily. Some you might have to convince them. Just like that, it just pulls right out. That's made out of plastic. Okay? I'm going to lay all these parts over here so that we can keep track of them. Okay, now we got to take out these two screws here. Make sure you use a good screwdriver. You know, don't use something that's not intended for guns. Get the right screwdriver bit so that you don't strip out the head of the screw. I'll go ahead and take this apart here. Take these two screws out. Now we know that the bolt is in the cock position, okay? And that's the way we want it to be able to take it apart. The reason we know that is because we opened the chamber to check and see if the gun was loaded. These screws just pull straight out. Okay, once you got these screws removed, just lay them aside. Now this receiver cover will just lift right off. Just like that. And on the opposite side here you have this ejector. It just lifts right out. It has these two ears on it. That lifts right out. Lay it aside. Now you can see we've got the striker here in the cock position, ready to fire. Just leave it like that. Put the gun on safe so that you don't accidentally pull the trigger and release that and everything goes flying forward. Okay. Next we're going to take the barrel out. So you loosen this screw here at the bottom. Push in on it and that releases the barrel. Okay? Now the barrel just slides right out. Now just lift this stirrup out. It's got a little plate in front of it. This one here doesn't. But it says front on most of them, and that goes towards the front of the gun. I'm going to go ahead and put this screw in the bottom of this stirrup. Lay it aside. Now we can go ahead and slide this bolt right on out, just the way it is, with the return spring and the spring guide here. This pushes the bolt forward as the gun cycles, and then the bolt comes backwards from the firing of the cartridge, and then after it ejects the cartridge shell, it feeds another round into the chamber and the bolt moves forward. So I'm just going to keep this together just like it is. I've already cleaned everything on this, but while you have the bolt out, you can clean the rail guides here on both sides, clean the face of the bolt, anything that needs cleaning while you have access to it. Okay, we'll lay that up here. Now we're going to go ahead and release the striker. What I do is put my finger right here and hold pressure towards the rear. Put the gun on fire and squeeze the trigger and just ease it forward. Okay. Make sure you keep a hold of that striker, because if you squeeze the trigger with that, it's just going to go flying forward and it could crack the stock right up here. There's quite a bit of force behind that. So just ease it forward. There you can see the mainspring the mainspring guide, and the striker. Okay, we'll move that out of the way. Now then, I'm going to go ahead and remove the magazine tube. I'm going to zoom in on this here so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. Okay, right in here, the thing that holds the magazine tube in place is this clip right here. It's shaped like a big staple, for lack of any better term. And I'll use this scribe here to remove it. You just get under it and pull up on it, just like that, and it pops right out. Okay? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out for this next step. There you can see the inner workings of this nylon 66. Now it's time to remove the magazine tube, the outer tube. Once you have that retaining clip out, all you do is take your brass magazine tube, insert it back into the stock, just like when you're loading the gun. Push it all the way in, turn it, and the whole thing comes out, as you can see. Now you can go ahead and clean this tube. You know, you have full access to it. If there's any rust, you can take it off with some fine steel wool. This one here thankfully had no rust. And what I do is I take a lightly impregnated rag that has mineral oil on it, impregnated into it, and I go over all these parts before I reinstall anything on these guns. Okay, now it's time to remove the trigger guard here. Trigger guard is also made out of nylon or polymer, and there's a pin right here, right at the front of the trigger guard, just above it. There's a pin that retains that. Just take a punch like this and you can push it right out in most cases. If not, you can motivate it with a small ball peen hammer, but in most cases it'll push right out, just like that. Okay, now pull down slightly, dislodge it from the rest of the stock here, and just push forward, and it's retained by these hooks here on the end that engage the pistol grip of the stock. I'll go ahead and put this pin back in to the trigger guard. That way we know which pin goes with which part. Okay, we'll lay it aside. Now I'm going to remove the safety. Very easy to do, actually. First thing we got to do is take out this safety pin here, and there's a spring and a ball bearing underneath this safety pin here. Let me zoom in on that. Okay, if you look at the back of this pin, there's a little groove inside of it. That's supposed to be faced towards the rear. Okay? What I do is I put my finger over the hole and just pull out on that pin. The reason you want to do that is because that spring is under a little bit of pressure from that ball bearing, and if you pull that pin out, sometimes that spring will jump out and fly across the room. Now just flip the gun over, and you can catch the ball bearing and the pin in the palm of your hand, just like that. Okay? Now we're going to go ahead and remove this safety. We need to push this pin right here out. That retains the safety. Okay? Once again, we'll take this punch and push it right out. There it comes out of the other side, just like that. Now you can just pull the safety right out. just like that. Now I'll keep this pin with the safety, that way we know which pin belongs with that. Alright. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the trigger. There's a small spring right here at the front of the trigger that returns the trigger. There you can see how it's working that sear forward and backward. Okay? Just take your scribe here that has a hooked end. You can make you a tool out of a paper clip that will also work, but I'll hook this scribe around the loop of that spring right there and then just pull it right off. Just like that. It's really easy. Just get in there and just pry the loop of that spring off. In some books they say that's really difficult, but it's not. Not really. Quite easy actually. Now we can remove the trigger just by pushing in on this bottom pin right here. It's right above this trigger. There you can see the pin. And it falls right out. There's the pin. There's the trigger. Okay? Keep the pin with the trigger. Once again, make sure you put all those pins back in there the same way. Okay, now it's time to remove the sear. Here's where you get into the nitty-gritty of this entire action here. Okay? What we're going to do, I'm going to zoom in here. And here you can see there's a spring right here that retains this, and it's hooked onto this bridge inside of the stock. There you can see the spring. Just take your scribe or whatever you've got and unhook it just like that. Okay? And if you've noticed, I had the stock down so that this part of the sear right here made contact with the surface, because there's tension behind this spring inside here. Now we can go ahead and remove this pin right here because there's no more tension on it. Just push it right out. There's that pin, and this just falls right out. Now to remove all of the inner workings here, there's two small pins on each side. They're the same size. You won't get those mixed up. Let me zoom out on that a little bit. There you can see a little pin right there. You just push it out, or push it in. Give it a little bit of pressure here. There's one of them. It don't matter if you mix these up because they're the same. You know, both of them are the same. Now the whole piece will just fall right out, or lift right out, as you can see. I just keep this together, and there's both pins right here. Now next we're going to remove the cartridge stop. As you can see, it's under spring tension. Just push in on this pin right here. Push it all the way out, just like that. Hold a little bit of tension on that and pull your punch back out, and both parts are easily removed, just like that. And don't worry about how this goes back in there. I'll show you how to do that. Now, one of the most difficult parts about putting these stocks back together is getting this little cartridge guide, the ramp, back in there. As you can see, I just barely put any pressure on that and it fell right out. Getting it out is not the problem. Getting it back in is. This is probably the single most difficult part to put back in the gun. Now the gun is completely disassembled. You can clean all the rails here. Let me zoom out on that. As I was saying, the gun is completely disassembled. You can clean the gun really well. Still got a little bit of grime right there from previous use. I need to go over that with a toothbrush. And I really get it cleaned out real well. We're going to go over this stock, and I'll get it all sanded down and polished back out, and then we'll reassemble the gun. Alright, now my friends, I've got this stock with all the internal parts removed except for these stock retaining bolts, which really are not necessary to remove them, just leave them in place. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the stock with some 2000 grit paper here. And then once I get done going over it with that, I'll go over it with some 2500 grit paper, wet or dry. And then I'll wipe the stock down and we'll go over it with a polishing wheel to try to hopefully get some of the luster back into the stock, because as you can see, there's a lot of scratches and a few gouges in this stock. You know, somebody really abused this gun. And honestly speaking, these nylons, they can take a lot of abuse and keep right on going. Don't let the plastic stock or the plastic look of this gun fool you, because these are really tough, well-made guns. And anyone that's ever owned one can attest to their reliability and functionality. If you ever take it out and shoot it, they're like Timex. They can take a licking and keep on ticking. They're really good little guns, even though they look cheap. And that's honestly the reason I kind of shied away from them in the past, because of the plastic look to them. I always thought, well, I just don't want a plastic gun. But nowadays, if you think about it, a lot of guns have polymer stocks. They're made out of plastic. Handguns, shotguns, and rifles. They just didn't have this plastic look to them. They tried to simulate wood grain to some degree with this Mohawk brown and also the Seneca green stock. They look kind of brown to me, even though they have a greenish tinge. But the most common stock, as I mentioned before in my other video, is the Mohawk brown. This is most likely what you have. But if you want to try to restore some of the luster, then I'll show you how to do that, no matter which model that you have, whether it's the brown, the black, or the green. Okay, first of all, I'm going to go over it with some wet or dry 2000 grit and just really kind of bear down on it, try to get into those scratches. Here, I'll show you what I'm doing. And you'll get kind of a hazy look to the stock. Don't worry about that, because we're going to get it back to a nice glossy finish when we're all done. But I just want to go over it and try to remove just, some of the scratches. You're not going to get them all out unless you really, really go over it with some aggressive paper. Now, as I'm working my way across the surface of this stock, you'll notice that as the water dries, you'll get this white powdery residue that's building up on the surface of the stock. It's like talcum powder. That's actually the nylon polymer that's left over from sanding. And you'll get this hazy look, like I mentioned, that hazy looking stock. Don't worry, we're going to get this back to a nice shiny luster. But I just want to get most of the small scratches out. I'm not too worried about getting them all out because I can't with what I've got here. I mean, you'll be sitting here for days trying to get all these scratches out with this really, really fine wet or dry paper. I just want to go over the surface and clean it up for this project and then get the gun put back together. But try not to miss any parts, you know, go over the whole thing as best you can if you just want a shooter, you know, something that's not really as much of a collector's item, because I've run across these nylon 66s at gun shows that were in just pristine condition. I've got one that's nearly pristine, and that just means that whoever owned the gun really took good care of it. You know, they didn't scratch it up, they didn't abuse the gun, they didn't throw it in the back of their pickup truck bed, or they didn't kick it around, you know. If it was laying on the floor, they didn't kick it over into the corner or whatever, which you should never do anyway. I mean, it's a firearm. But the gun was just well taken care of. It was pretty much a safe queen, as you would probably call a gun like that, something that was put away and well taken care of. There's a little nick right there. I'm going to remove that with a pocket knife. These guns get dropped, they get stepped on. You know, they fall over from where they've leaned against something, and they fall over onto some gravel or something, and the stock gets scratched. But I just want to get that little burr right there off of there best I can. Like I said, I'm not going to get it perfect, but get it back to somewhat of a presentable condition. Smooth that over a little bit, and then I'll go over it with the polishing wheel. But as I was saying, you know, you'll run across them a lot of times at these gun shows, and you're wondering, why are they asking such premium prices for a plastic gun? Well, the nylon 66 is no longer being made, and I doubt they'll ever start making them again. They might, you never know, but I really doubt it. And what's out there is all that's left. And if it's one that's in really good condition, you know, and it's not all beat up and scratched up and rusted or whatever, then naturally they're going to demand a higher price for it because it's still almost like brand new. You know, these guns back in the day sold for $50, $60, $70, depending on what time period you're talking about. And they just weren't very expensive at all. And I wish I could go back in time and buy a bunch of these in the original boxes, because I'll tell you what, they would be quite an investment for what they're bringing now. Mostly what you see are guns that people had in their collection for many, many years, and they've just kept them in good condition. They might have taken them out and shot them every now and then, keep them running, but then they cleaned them and put them up and just took really good care of them. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to keep it as short as I can and just go over it like this, just to show you how to do it if you own one that's got some scratches on it and you want to remove the scratches, and also to be able to disassemble and reassemble the gun, get it back in shooting condition. Alright, my friends, I went ahead and sanded this stock down with 2500 grit wet or dry, and I got most of the scratches out of it. There's still a few in there, but not too bad. A little bit right there, but a lot of that'll polish out. And this polymer is so hard that it will actually polish out to a glossy finish, as we're about to see. What you'll need It's something like I've got here, a drill. It could be a corded drill, doesn't matter really. You can even use a buffer. And I've got some of this polishing compound here. This is turtle wax, I believe. Yeah, turtle wax. Heavy duty rubbing compound. And we're going to put some on the stock here, and I'm just going to put a light coating of it on the stock. And this stuff will dry on you. It doesn't really matter though, because the compound is impregnated into this paste, and that's what actually does the polishing. Set this aside for a minute. That little bit that I put on the other side there will be enough to carry through and do both sides. I'm just applying it here with my hand, my fingertips. Now you just want to go over it with this buffing wheel. Nice and even. Don't ever stay in one spot too long because you can burn it. There you can see it's starting to come back already. Anyway, I'm going to work through this, and then I'll be back with you. I'll put a finer wheel on here and we'll go over it again. Okay guys, I'm finished with the polishing wheel. Now I'm going to put the final touches on this stock. I got most of the scratches out. As you can see, it looks a lot better. But I'm using some of this snow seal here. And I just take a little bit with my finger and just apply it to the stock and rub it in. This kind of brings the color back out somewhat. It feels a little waxy. This is used for sealing leather and other fabrics and stuff like Gore-Tex to waterproof them. I've even used this stuff on feather fletching for arrows, and it kind of waterproofs them more or less. It makes them shed water. But it works really good on these nylon stocks, I have to say, from past experience. That it just, I don't know, it just adds something to them, and it helps fortify them a little bit. Now I'll go over it with this pad here. It helps clean a lot of the old rubbing compound out of the nooks and crannies, and I'll tell you what really helps bring out the luster. There you can see what I'm talking about. Basically gets the scratches out, the process does, and kind of helps rejuvenate the stock a little bit. It'll make an ugly gun look pretty good, actually. There's still a few little nicks here and there, but overall it's in pretty good shape. Turned out better than I thought it would. Go over the comb of the stock here. I'll tell you what, it makes it feel ultra smooth. I mean, really, really smooth. It makes it feel good to the touch. Go over it with this terry cloth now. And then once I get it all done, we'll put it back together. Well, my friends, I think I got it pretty well restored. I got nearly all the scratches out. There's still a few minor little places in it, but you know, that's going to be okay because it's just a shooter anyway. But this will actually help bring the value of your gun up in case it's scratched up like that. So, you know, you can follow the steps that I've undertaken to help restore the stock on this Nylon 66. You don't want to spray anything on here like polyurethane or whatever because, like I said, the polymer that these stocks are made out of is hard enough that it'll polish out to a nice luster like that. So let's go ahead and get this gun reassembled. And in case you've got yours apart and you don't know how to put it back together, follow along and I'll show you how. Okay, the first step in reassembling the gun is probably the most difficult and tricky, and that's putting this little cartridge guide back into the stock. And it goes right up in here, right in that slot. Let me zoom in on that so you see what I'm talking about. It fits right in here, okay? And I use these tweezers like I've got here, and I'll grab this thing from the bottom up, just like that. Pull it up there into position and try to slide it into place with my finger on the underside. Let me see if I can do this on camera so that you can see it. I'll reach in here and grab this thing. Okay, got a hold of it now. I'll take my pinky finger, come underneath. Well, try it one more time here. Okay. Now, I put pressure on it with my pinky finger from underneath, just like that. I let go of it and try to position it forward. And there it is. I've got pressure on it with my finger here, okay, underneath. Don't let pressure off of it, because sometimes if you let off, it'll fall back down. And this is one of the most tricky parts to get in there. But that's the way it should look, just like that. think you can see that pretty well now. This is the part. Now you want to keep your finger on it as you turn the gun over and lay it down like this. Once you got that in place, you're almost home free because the rest is just the reassembly. There's not a whole lot of tricks involved. But anyway, let me go ahead and get ready for the next step. Alright folks, I went ahead and moved the camera over to the side so I've got light going right into this part of the gun here. You don't want to turn the gun over, you want to leave it in this position until you get this cartridge stop back in place. Okay? As you can see, there's two little holes right here that this pin right here goes through. Remember I said keep up with your pins. And the way I like to do it is I put the cartridge stop in this position just like it's supposed to fit in the gun. Remember this little foot right here goes towards you with the gun pointed in this direction. I've got the pistol grip down here on my left and the forend on my right, so that you know what I'm talking about here. Now I just drop it down into place, and there's a hole right here. Okay, just below the ejection port. Now we want to get our cartridge stop in place, and I put my scribe in there to get the hole lined up, just like that. Okay. Now you've got this spring right here that puts tension on the cartridge stop and on that cartridge guide. But first, we're going to put this pin in. So I just line it up with my scribe here, come through the hole, come all the way through, and make sure it's flush on both sides. Now, this spring goes in there just like that. You see this little raised up place right here? That goes down. And the end of this right here goes under that pin that we just put in there. Let's see if I can do this with the tweezers so you'll be able to see it better. See, it just feeds under that pin like that. Push it forward. Let me zoom in on that so you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay. See how that sits in there? Okay, now take your screwdriver and just push it forward till it clicks. Just like that. Now it's in place. Now you should have some tension on this cartridge stop. Now you can turn it over and you don't have to worry about this cartridge guide right here falling out. You can actually push down on that cartridge guide and you'll feel a little bit of tension on it right there. But this is in place and this is in place now. Okay, now it's time to put in this sear disconnect. And the way it goes in there is with the long end of the arm facing towards the rear of the gun, towards the pistol grip. Okay? Just like that. And there's a little ledge in here, a little peg sticking out right there. You see where my scribe's pointed. That arm rests right on top of that, And remember those two little short pins? I told you it didn't matter which side they went in. That's what's going to hold that in there. Okay, here's something to remember. If you look at your sear disconnect here, you've got a big hole at the bottom and a little hole just above it. These little pins, remember I showed you these two little pins? Both of them are the same. They go through that hole right there. Just like that. Okay? And this hole right here, I'll point to it with my scribe, that's what holds it in, right there. So with the pistol grip on your right side, let's go ahead and feed this in here. Normally I do it the other way around, but I've got the sun coming in from this direction. Now remember, you want the leg of this sear disconnect going towards the rear, okay? And that little ledge I was talking about is right here on the right side. And it fits right on top of that little ledge. That's what holds it in place pretty much as you feed it in there. Now I take my scribe and put through that hole that the pin goes in and align that hole. This can be a little bit tricky, but it's usually not too bad. Remember, don't use any force whatsoever. It should just drop down in there, but it fits on there perfectly. Okay, now, as you can see, I've got that scribe going right through that hole. That means it's lined up. Now leave your scribe in place, or whatever it is that you use, alignment tool, and feed the other side into the hole, the other pin into that hole on the opposite side, and push it in there till it's flush. Just like that. Now I know that this side's going to line up because I've got my scribe in here, just like I know that this side lined up because it can only go in there one way, folks. So lay it down, put your other pin in, just like that. Okay, now turn the gun over. I'm going to zoom in on this part. Now take your scribe, grab that little spring right there and hook it back over this little bridge right here. That's the way it should sit. Now the disconnect is back in place. Now as you can see, that little arm right there is resting right on that ledge, and the spring for the trigger is dangling right here. Just leave that the way it is. Don't bother with that. Just leave it alone. Okay guys, let me zoom in on this part right here. This is not difficult, but it is kind of critical that you get it right. This is the sear fully assembled. Just like this is the way it would be inside the gun. You've got the sear spring, and the pin right here. And I'm going to show you how to put that in there. Okay? Right here is the hole that it fits into. Right there. What you want to do is get your pin just started. Just start it in the hole. You don't want it sticking out yet. When you look inside here, you just want it flush with the inside, okay? I think that's pretty explanatory right there. Now, this sear, you can put it in from the bottom, okay? And it fits in there just like that. And the leg, the short leg of this spring fits inside this notch right here. Just like that. Can you see that little notch? That leg has to sit up against that. So, I'm going to grab this sear and feed it in here with this pair of tweezers so you can see what I'm doing. Okay? Coming in from the bottom, you want to get that sear lined up with your pin and just start the pin into the hole of the sear. Just like that. Okay? Now, this spring, the long end, the leg of this spring goes towards the rear of the gun, towards the pistol grip. Okay? And remember, it fits against that ledge on the sear, which is on the right side of the gun or on the left side if it's upside down. Now all you want to do is put your sear spring in here and get it lined up with the hole. Okay? Okay, once you got it in there, go ahead and feed it all the way through and make sure it's flush right here. Push it in there good and flush like all the rest of them. Alright? Make sure your trigger spring is in the downward position. This little tiny spring on the side of this disconnector leg. And then move this forward. And now the sear is installed. Okay, before I put the trigger back in, I want to show you in detail how this sear and sear disconnector actually work, how they operate. You saw me push that down and engage it just a moment ago when I installed it. Okay, on the bottom you have this pivot right here. And remember, there's that spring there that holds tension against it that you hooked onto the little bar right here, this bridge. If you put rearward pressure on that, that actually releases the sear. I'm holding it here with my finger. So I'm going to go ahead and put pressure on that just like I showed you towards the rear, and that pivots it forward. And as you can see, I ease that up with my finger. So before you put the trigger in, once you got your sear put back in place, you want to push down on it, put rearward pressure on this pivot on the bottom, now the sear is in place and you're ready to install the trigger. And remember, that little spring right there should be dangling down. That's going to hook up to your trigger. That's your trigger return spring. Okay, let's go ahead and get this trigger installed. We're almost done here. Remember, I said keep up with this pin right here that holds the trigger in. Trigger sits in there just like this. Okay, just like that. Go ahead and put your pin in, but first I'm going to use my scribe once again to guide that hole to make sure it's lined up. We'll get our pin lined up with the hole. and that'll align everything as I push it through. You might have to wiggle it a little bit, but either way, now the trigger's in place. Okay? Now you want to reach in from the bottom. You can use a bent paper clip or anything, but I've got this scribe here. You want to reach in from the bottom and grab that little spring and hook it back on to the foot of this trigger right here. I'm going to zoom in on that so you can see what I'm doing. See that little foot right there? Just grab that spring, feed it back on there, just like that. I'll tell you what, when you have one of these little scribes, this is just about absolutely necessary when you're messing with one of these old guns. Okay, now it's time to install the safety, which we have here. I'll zoom in a little bit. Okay. And you just want to slide it in there pretty much from the rear. Just like that. And remember, there was a pin that was holding that in. Did you keep up with that pin? I did. Here it is. Okay? And that goes through this hole right here. That hole right there. I'm going to flip it around so you can see down inside there what I'm doing. You want the bottom of the gun facing upwards when you put this pin in, because this safety actually rides against that pin right there. Okay? So put it in the forward fired position and it goes just under this sear spring. Okay? Make sure it's flush. Alright, the way that you know that you've got this safety installed correctly is if when you move it back and forth, you can see the sear disconnect here going up and down. See how that's working that arm up and down? Now we know the safety is installed the way it should be. Now we're going to install the safety detent. First of all, you got this ball bearing. You just drop it in the hole right here. Just like that. Now put your spring in. And now this little safety spring retainer. It's a little pin. And it's got a little notch on the end of it there. You see that little notch? That faces towards the rear of the gun. Now you just want to push down on that spring with that pin and then feed it in there just like that. And then push forward until that little notch lines up with the edge of that spring. Now that's installed the way it should be. Okay? Very simple. Now we're going to go ahead and put on our trigger guard. Remember, you got these hooks right here. They engage into the rear of the stock. Then just push it down till it clicks into place. Put your retaining pin back in place, just like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the gun on safe. Now it's time to install the magazine tube. I'm going to wipe it down here because this is blued steel. I've got this cloth impregnated with mineral oil, very slightly. Okay, if you look at the side, on each side, on the end of this magazine tube, there's a little notch cut out. Remember this guy? This little staple looking thing? It fits right into that notch on each side, and that's what holds it in place while it's in the gun. Okay? So we'll go ahead and insert it. I always like to put it, there's a seam right here that runs along the length of it. That's where that piece of steel was rolled into a tube. And what I'm going to do is put that seam towards the bottom. Okay? Doesn't really matter, to be honest with you. That's just the way I do it. Go ahead and stick it back into place here. And I leave the inner magazine tube in place because I use it as a guide so that I can maneuver it back here. Because you're going to have to line those notches up. Now I take my needle nose pliers and fit it right down into that little recess. Let me show you, just so you'll know what I'm talking about here. There you can see that piece right there. And just push it down with your finger. Now, when that retainer clip is flush all the way down, you know that the magazine tube is installed. Okay, my friends, now the next step would be to install the striker spring, and the spring guide. Okay, the spring guide goes into the rear of the stock. There's a hole right back here, just forward of the safety, where this guide is fed into. Okay, that's the way it goes, like that. Now the trick to this, I've seen this on other instructional videos, is in order for this striker to go in, it has to get past the sear and disconnector here. So the only way you can do that is by pulling the trigger and then depressing this right here, and you have to hold both of them while somebody, I mean, sometimes you can do it if you're ambidextrous enough to go ahead and feed all that together at the same time. But I'm going to show you a trick, and I have not seen a video anywhere that actually shows this trick. Go ahead and squeeze the trigger. You'll see the disconnector moving forward. Put your scribe right into the side here. Let me zoom in on that. That way you'll see exactly what I'm doing here. Okay, see how that's moving back and forth? Put your scribe right here into this open space between the sear and the disconnector, and just push down on it like that, holding the scribe off to the side like I've got it here. What that does is it keeps this part depressed, because this will not go past that unless this is down. Okay, the striker will not go past the sear. It'll hit right here on this edge. You just cannot get it in there any other way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and assemble these three parts. You'll see a hole in the back of the striker. And then we'll feed it right here into the rails. Don't force anything. Okay, just feed it in there until it goes in by itself. You don't want to force anything. You might have to maneuver it around a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and zoom out now. Now all you got to do is hold your scribe in place and just push back on the striker and go all the way to the rear with it. Now, once you've got it in this position, go ahead and put the safety back on so that you don't accidentally hit the trigger maybe and all this goes flying forward. All right? Now the next thing we're going to install is the bolt. The bolt spring or return spring and this pin right here. The pin goes into the hole right here. Then the spring goes over the guide there, the spring guide or pin. And then the spring actually goes into the end of this guide, the one that we just installed. Now you go ahead and align your rails here and the bolt will slide rearward, just like that. Now what you want to do is temporarily put your charging lever into that little hole right there in the bolt so that it won't go any further forward, okay? Now, this is a different type of barrel clamp, but I'm going to show you the original barrel clamp here. And this is what is typically on all nylon 66s or nylon rifles that have this design. You'll see this little plate right here and it says front right there. Okay? That little slot inside that plate lines up with this little peg right here. This one here is broken, so I had to replace it with this one. Now, that slides into this slot right here, just like that. And this is what holds the barrel in. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and install this one because it's not broken like the other one. It's not the same, but it will actually hold the barrel in, okay? Now, before I put the barrel in, I'm going to wipe it down with my oil cloth. Slide the barrel into place until the notch lines up right there. Go ahead and push down on it. Turn it over and start your screw here. Just snug it down. Now your barrel is installed. You can go ahead and remove the charging handle for now. Okay, like I said, this here needs to flip forward. And remember, don't forget your ejector because the gun won't work right without it. It just fits right here into this slot and it just rests there. There's nothing really that holds it in except for the receiver cover. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and slide the receiver cover on. And we'll go ahead and start our bolts or our screws, the receiver cover retaining screws. And like I said, this one here, I had to make this little disc to fit in the other side. And we'll go ahead and get these started. I got a screwdriver blade that I actually custom made to fit these screws on a nylon 66 because I see so many of these that have gouged slots where they've been pretty much marred up by the wrong screwdriver. This one here fits just about right. It's actually kind of a rounded slot, so I shaped this one kind of a rounded shape to fit that screw slot just right. Now remember, you don't have to tighten these down like a lug nut. Just nice and snug. We'll go ahead and put our charging handle back in, and it just sticks in that hole right there inside the bolt. Now with the safety on, I'm going to go ahead and check the functionality of this rifle. So we'll put some rounds in here to see if it'll actually feed them and eject them the way it's supposed to. All right, here we go. Okay. Pretty good, folks. Now, I'm going to show you another little trick here. Don't put this rifle away with the striker in the fully cocked position, because that spring is under tension all the time, and eventually you'll weaken that spring. So there's no real way of releasing the tension on a spring without damaging the firing pin, but I found a way. Go ahead and make sure the gun's not loaded. Once again, it's empty. Put it in fire position. Now, ever so slightly, pull back on the charging handle. I mean, maybe a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch or so, about that far. And now you can go ahead and drop the hammer. Do you see how that bolt moved forward? What happened is that striker traveled forward and hit the back of the bolt without slamming the firing pin into the chamber. As it moved forward, I allowed the bolt to travel forward under the tension of my finger. There's so many 22 chambers that get damaged because people dry fire them, and that firing pin slams into the front part of the chamber. No need to do that, folks. All right, well, I guess we got this little nylon put back together, and now the only thing that's left to do is to take it outside and get it sighted in and see how well that it'll perform. And I think that the owner will be pleasantly surprised to get this little rifle back in shape after we worked on it, got most of the scratches out of it, polished it, and completely cleaned out the action, had it completely apart, and made sure that the functionality was the way it should be, and also replaced some of the broken and worn down parts. So I'm really curious to see how well this little gun will shoot. So come follow me out to the range, and let's do a little plinking with this old Nylon 66. Well guys, I was going to finish out this video yesterday, but it was starting to get a little bit dark on me, so I decided to come out here this afternoon and do some plinking with this Nylon 66 that I restored. And I put up a target down here at 25 yards and took some shots, and I think I'm pretty well sighted in at that distance. So I'll be shooting at 50 yards. I've got my steel targets up down there, the same ones I've been shooting at all along, and I think we should be in pretty good shape. Been shooting these CCI standard velocity loads to check for the functionality of this gun, and so far it seems to be running pretty well. I don't know what the owner is going to do about this receiver cover. Personally, I just leave it on there. It's not going to hurt anything, but that speckling, that rough speckling is still there, if you can see it. I mean, it's a lot better than it was, but the only way really to get that off is to take it all the way down to bare metal, go all the way through it and then have it professionally hot blued. But like I mentioned earlier, I don't know anyone here in my area that still does that. The only other solution I can think of is to get another receiver cover, if you can find one. And if you were to order one online, you'd have to go through an FFL dealer, because the serial number is actually on the receiver cover. They consider the receiver as the gun itself. So anyway, we're going to take some shots down here at 50 yards and see how well we can connect. Let me go grab that target and I'll show you real quick. I shot these off of a sandbag rest, so let me grab that target right quick and we'll discuss that. Okay folks, this is what I got at 25 yards with open sights. I'm sure that would tighten up if I had a scope on the gun. But we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 shots right there. And they're all pretty well centered. So let me load up some shells here. Okay, I got my targets set up, got the gun loaded up. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on those targets down there and we'll see if we can connect with them. Alright. Okay, open sights at 50 yards. Let's try for that squirrel on the right. Okay. Let's try for the squirrel on the left. And the bunny rabbit. Okay. I see a swinging target on the far left. Okay, I see a swinging target on the far right. Okay, and there's one right next to it. Okay, I'll tell you what, that bunny rabbit's kind of bothering me. He's still sitting up there. Let's see if we can knock him in the head. I want to hit that swinging target on the far left again. And that's it. Well folks, I think I got this little nylon 66 back in shape, ready to be enjoyed once again. Now let me make one thing clear. I know for a fact that the current owner of this gun just recently bought this, so he bought it in the condition that it was in for very little money, and he wanted it back in good shooting condition so that he could get out and enjoy it. I don't know the person, I just know him through a friend of mine, and he needed someone that knew something about these old guns to be able to get it back into shooting condition, and so that he could get out and actually enjoy the little rifle the way it should be enjoyed. So if you own a nylon 66, hopefully the instructions that I gave you in this video will suffice to be able to take the gun apart, fix whatever you need to fix, whether you need to clean it or repair or replace a part inside the gun, and then be able to successfully put it back together the way that it should be so that you can enjoy your nylon 66 once again. Hopefully I was able to accomplish that with the content of this video. So I got this one percolating pretty good, and I'll tell you what, I really like these old guns now. I used to shy away from them, to be honest with you, because of the plastic stock, you know, the plastic look to them. But I know for a fact that this is some very tough material. Otherwise, it wouldn't have lasted this long, folks. And if you own a Nylon 66, whether you own the Mohawk Brown, the Apache Black, the Seneca Green, the Model 77, you know, the 10C, whatever, these are great little guns. They'll last for decades, and you can pass them down to your children or your grandchildren. I mean, they're just great little rifles. They're no longer being made, sadly, but if you own one, at least now you've got a video to fall back on in case you need to work on it. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close out the video. Thanks a lot for coming along. I really appreciate it. And if you like to go hunting, fishing, camping, shooting, hiking, whatever your outdoor pursuit happens to be, I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. But remember this, hit that like button, smash the bell icon, and subscribe. That way you'll know when more videos like this will be coming your way. So until next time, y'all get out there, enjoy the great outdoors, get your 22s out and have a lot of fun. Just remember to do it safely. I'll see you guys next time. God bless and take care.